I want to move off to the Trump crypto reserve trade. I mean, the Trump trade just keeps on giving. I mean, it's just affecting everything. We were even to the point of talking about is Canada or Greenland going to become the 51st state or be annexed by the United States? I mean, we are in crazy town here, people, about the types of things that are moving markets. Um, so I just wanted to pull up the a little bit here on the Bitcoin reserve. So on the eve, this comes from the New York Times, the first day Trump order a federal stockpile of Bitcoin. On the eve of Mr. Trump's inauguration, the cryptocurrency industry is pushing his incoming administration to execute an audacious plan that would have seemed unimaginable just a year ago, a government program to buy and hold billions of dollars in Bitcoin. As he campaigned last summer, Mr. Trump vowed to create a federal Bitcoin stockpile that would serve as a permanent national asset to benefit all Americans. Bitcoin enthusiasts hailed the idea as potentially transformative, claiming that it would help reduce the national debt. Mr. Trump could still abandon the plan, and its details are under debate. But industry executives have spent weeks lobbying to shape the proposal, raising hopes that Mr. Trump might act soon after taking office. Before I start here, I have to say, round of applause to the Bitcoin maxis. Round of applause. You guys talked about the idea that eventually Bitcoin might get into this the national conversation of as being a legitimate reserve asset, and I did not believe that would happen in any time in my lifetime. And before my head went completely gray, we're seeing it happen. Kudos. All right, we're talking about Bitcoin here at near all-time highs, and I've never expected this to happen as quickly or as dramatic as it has. Did you?
It continues to be the opportunity cost of my entire investing career. I love to hate it. I wish I owned more of it. However, I couldn't have guessed in all the early years of Bitcoin trading that eventually it would become part of the Federal Reserve holding, or there would be some kind of Bitcoin reserve owned by the government. I anticipated that some part of the value of Bitcoin would be offset by the fact that the government had seized much of the Bitcoin that was used in crimes back in the day, and right. So that sort of reduced the amount of circulating supply in Bitcoin, which helps a bit. But this is a different equation. When the government starts buying it in this way, when MicroStrategy is buying it as much as they can at the same time, these are bullish indicators in my mind.
That's right. And what I find to be so fascinating here is that, so you have that opportunity cost. I have that feeling too. And so we missed out on, let's say, $10,000 Bitcoin to $100,000 Bitcoin. Let's say someone did. And so they're lamenting they're lamenting it. They have that Peter Schiff sort of resentment towards anybody who has Bitcoin. I could totally understand that. But now the case for me for a Bitcoin to 100,000 from 10,000, I was sort of like up in the air about it. It could happen, it could not. You would take the bet, and I saw it more as an option. If it worked out, great. Now the argument of Bitcoin from 100,000 to 1,000,000 doesn't seem so crazy to me. That to me actually seems far more realistic than I felt at from 10,000 to 1,000 or from 1,000 to 10,000. Mm-hmm. Actually, you were in the 1,000 to 10,000 range there, where like that's where you had started with the Bitcoin, or earlier, sooner than that?
Much earlier, yeah. Earlier. I was originally trading in the $3 to $5 range.
Oh, yikes!
Yeah, tell me about it.
So the what we didn't have then from the early days till now, or until a few years ago, is the derivatives market for crypto. We didn't have a lot of these exchanges. We didn't have ways of automating these types of trades. Now there's a lot more information and a lot more less risky ways of trading it up from 100,000 to 1,000,000. And now I'm sort of on the 1,000,000 bandwagon. And before I thought, well, the only really way to profit is go to altcoin space, which essentially act as leverage Bitcoin. If you choose it right, you get to ride the hype, you get to ride some of these assets. But I feel much more comfortable now taking certain types of bets strictly on Bitcoin, because it almost feels like safe, right, in the crypto space. From a Bitcoin from 100,000 to 1,000,000. And when you run the numbers on that sort of thing, on the different types of leverage plays you can do, if you DCA into it, you can make quite a bit of money. In fact, you can make just as much money as you did from 10,000 to 100,000. So I'm interested in those types of bets. But in addition to that, I just wanted to point out the again on Kalshi. If you want to make a bet on this, I always love these types of things. You can bet, will Trump create a national Bitcoin reserve this year? And so I'm toying with the idea of just
They're
betting on a
pretty
no.
confident
Yeah. Well, I would love to take the other side of the trade here and then buy Bitcoin long and just have this a short to there. So then I would feel like
as a small hedge. Yeah.
exactly, or
Interesting way to
even
hedge.
correct, or just like if it would feel pretty good. Like, hey, look, I put he didn't do the Bitcoin reserve. I
Hmm.
got a little bit of money out of it. I could sort of pat myself in the back that I made some money both ways. Um, uh, is this type of trade something that would be interesting to you? Does this appeal to you in any way?
It's a little harder to follow. I still kind of maintain this viewpoint that there's, at least up until the event itself, it's more of a trend following strategy on Kalshi. So it's kind of hard to predict the best place to get in and sort of express your viewpoint until maybe you've measured it from more of a technical level and you feel like there's enough sentiment in one direction or the other that's too far away from where it should be, that maybe that's the point to get in on one side of the trade or the other.
Right.
So I tend to take more of a technical view on Kalshi bets rather than a biased position one way or the other. As to whether or not he'll actually create the reserve, I don't know.
I wouldn't want to if I were him, if I were Trump. I wouldn't want to anger the hornet's nest of Bitcoin maxis. That's not one of those promises that you're going to renege on and that you're not going to hear blowback from. Um, I'd be very surprised if he backtracked on that. You'd almost expect him to say yes, we'll do it, and then 2 years from now going, oh well, we couldn't do it, as opposed to not saying anything about it. So in his to me the inauguration, what was it on Monday?
Mhm.
I'm going to be watching that speech like I do the Federal Reserve minutes and the press conferences. Like there are trades aplenty that you can take based on what's going on over there headed into it.
Sure.
Sell the news type events or new trends that'll be started. So it should be pretty interesting.
That said, I
Um,
think the easiest bet here is still just going long Bitcoin, especially as we come back and retest this original high of 108,000. We break past that resistance zone, and it's going to be a nice move into the next zone.
So I'm curious here, looking at the chart. So we're breaking up to towards all time highs. We had this issue of these issue. We had these two channels, right? We had this almost like this upward channel and then a downward channel, and we're breaking up above here. So if you had to, two things I wanted to ask you. One, as far as ultimately, now that we're in blue sky territory, what's your price levels that you're looking at for the upside? And then for the downside, would you have any bear case for this actually coming down towards this area?
I mean, the bear case is still that it gets rejected at 108,000, in which case it retraces to the levels that I had mentioned before. We come back and we retest the $73,000 mark, or even head back a little bit further and test the original resistance zone, which was sort of a descending trend that we had before that whole accumulation phase all through the end of 2024. I would want to see it come back and test that trend line, and it could put us at roughly 68,000. So if we can't maintain some trajectory above 108,000, I would expect a full retrace back. That said, if we do see a move to the upside from here, my target would be somewhere around a much larger trend, and I would say that would place us somewhere about. Sorry, I'm kind of doing this in real time
No,
here.
because you're much better at the blue sky territory. Because I don't have any techniques for determining upside blue sky prices.
Yeah, why don't I share kind of my thought process here? Let me share my window. It's going to get a little messy, but I think you'll be able to kind of tell where I'm going with this. So the longer term trend for Bitcoin, where we saw the most recent pullback, which began that next cycle, which led to one more pullback, which began this cycle. That sort of Elliott wave structure, if you will, is what we're trying to measure for the remainder of this long term move. And what I would be interested in is what happens when we go from this point to this point to this point, which is our 3-point trend-based Fibonacci measurement, that would place us at about 180,000 as our sort of target price if we continue from here. I would expect, of course, some continued volatility all through this zone. But my expectation is we would break into a new zone around here, perhaps pull back once more and test the 108,000 zone, and then move up from here to about the $180,000 line. Before that marks potentially the end of that cycle and a much deeper retrace after that.
All right, so that matches sort of like my back of the envelope thing, because if on previous episodes I was talking about how this bear flag that we've had here, I would expect that the next move up would be basically commensurate with this one. And so this was like a 160% move. What was that? 160% move? Yeah, 160%. And so I was expect something in the $150,000 range.
150 to 180 then. Yeah, somewhere in that territory. I still think there's some room for upside, but as usual, and is measured by just year-to-date returns, in general, Bitcoin has become less of a volatile asset than it was even in the early days when I was trading it. So we're not going to see 1,700% moves anymore. We'll certainly see 30, 40, 50% upside. Obviously, many of the moves that are over 2 or 3 year periods are between the 150 to 250% range, which is still a fantastic, very volatile upside for any kind of long-term bet. But I do think we're going to hit a top at some point here and have to pull back by 50 to 70% before we begin a new cycle again.
All right. So before we head into the next segment with the Carson Corner, I just wanted to state for the record that I'm still expecting at some point at the end of the cycle that we're going to head down towards this area.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is my low end that I'm looking at. So as far as I'm concerned, we're not going lower than actually, that's the wrong number. We're not going lower than 36,000 for now.
Okay.
And but I'm waiting for the top. When I get the top, I'm going to be aiming for this level down here, this moving average down here, as my price. And I'm looking forward to it, because this whole drawdown that we had here,
Mm-hmm.
all my signals were telling me not only that we're going to head down to this area, but also every level that we cross through. And this time I'm ready for it. Like, one of the things I love about trading the asset, I don't care if it goes up and down. Like, I'm not like, oh, I missed out on the move. I'll catch the down move. I have no problem with that. It's an oscillator. So I'm looking forward to the top, so I can short down to whatever. Let's call it 65,000.
Sure.
100,000.
Yeah, as we move into Kem's viewpoints on where the markets could be going, and I tend to share the sentiment that there could be a potential pullback. One thing I would say is that I'm still sort of neutral on my position on Bitcoin, because I still think there's some potential of a larger pullback, especially if equities start to pull back. That correlation between the two markets is still really high. Bitcoin shares about a 0.77 correlation to the S&P 500 over the last 100 trading days. And so it's important to recognize that, especially in times of crisis, most markets tend to correlate to one. So I would expect Bitcoin to be pulling back as well if equities pull back.